Hi, everyone. Welcome back here to Techstrong TV. I'm really happy to introduce you to my next guest. It's his first time on. We had a great conversation off camera. I think it's going to be a great conversation on here as well. His name is Aaron Warner. Aaron is the CEO of a company called ProCircular. And Aaron, welcome. Welcome
Thank
to
you,
Techstrong.
Alan. Excited to talk to you. Lots to talk about.
Yes, we do. But you know what? Before we talk about all that, I wanted to talk about you a minute. As I told you, our audience likes to know who's talking to them. How did they get to this chair?
Like
Why did Alan have him on? So tell us about Aaron.
like a lot of CEOs and people in the tech community, I am racked with imposter syndrome. So all of this is a little bit uncomfortable. But I have enjoyed technology since being the kid that took the TV apart. I spent 22 years in biotech as a CIO and helped to build
Really?
a really great company from don't cash your check on Friday to, a global player. We had facilities all over the world, thousands of employees, and they played a huge role in life sciences and R&D. It's an interesting perspective, partially because, like a lot of companies, I started ProCircular out of frustration. 2015, 2016, I could go to any of the big four and get a enterprise risk assessment, and it was like $750,000. And, we were doing 180 million in revenue. It's a good firm, right? But just too expensive. And frankly, with the folks that they were sending to me at the time, I'll leave the vendor out, but my team was running circles around these guys. So, 40 something, just finished my MBA. I thought, worst case scenario, if I really screw this up, I can go get a jobby job again. And,
Hmm?
but I haven't looked back. Biotech was a really interesting intro to cybersecurity, but we have been neck deep in it for a decade now at ProCircular. It's been quite a ride.
Absolutely. I've been in cyber myself almost 25 years. 25 years, that's 2026. And I was doing, well, we didn't call it cyber, of course, then, right? We called it InfoSec. But I
Information
was doing it,
assurance, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
I was doing it before 2001, even though too. Aaron, I got one question for you. When you're taking apart the TVs, was it tubes or solid state?
Tubes. And in fact, this is really going to date me. My best friend's dad was an engineer for AT&T or for Ma Bell. And my first foray into computing was to get these card reader machines up and running. We
Uh-huh.
could flip the
Yeah.
cards. We were so young, we pulled the vacuum tubes out and had fights with them.
Oh God Almighty! Yes, I do remember those. So, but that was when I was in school. That was your computer class was punch
Sure.
cards, and it was a lot of. We used to throw the cards around and then try to get them back in that
Oh
right.
my God. Yeah. Don't drop
Like
the
do like
box.
this and make them holding it so they'd fit in the. What a pain in the Anyway,
We've
it's
come a long way. A
yes,
long,
we have, and here we are where AI does that for us. But anyway, um, let's talk about Pro Circular. You said 10 years on this journey. You know, there are people out here who don't know Pro Circular. That's an overnight sensation to them.
Thank you.
Uh,
We take a different approach to things. I was a customer of all of these things for a long time. So I have a long list of frustrations with cyber in general. And if I had to sum it up, I'd say that the biggest difference is that ProCircular is about people. And everybody says that on their masthead and it's in their core values and all of those
mhm.
things. But um, when we look at cybersecurity, we think about people, process, and tech, right? Tech is a third of the equation. And I think most people in cyber feel like it's two-thirds at least, and that many or most or sometimes all of the problems are solvable by tools. Um, I love tools. I'm a huge practitioner of AI. I've been doing development since forever. Um, but it's about people. At the end of the day, people make decisions about budgeting. People make decisions about hardware or software, or what your stack looks like, or how you approach cybersecurity. People are the ones that click the thing that comes in that IT should have protected them from in the first place, right? That's not, the user is a victim in most cases. And I think we as an industry lose sight of that. I worked in a world where My worst user, this idiot that kept clicking things, had an MD PhD from Harvard and Caltech.
Really?
And yeah, a total idiot, right? But he kept clicking things and the department would complain about him endlessly. Like, this guy, what the hell is wrong with him? Like, you mean the MD or the PhD? Like, this is not an idiot. This is a guy that's targeted, and it really is a victim of the shortcomings of my security program and the IT program. So ProCircular was kind of a response to that. Like, look, we need to take this problem seriously, but we can't just be a hammer looking for a nail. People are the ones that make decisions here. How they do things flow over into process, and the tech is, to a certain degree, a byproduct of all of the intentions of everybody involved. So I know that everybody says this, that people are important and so forth, but I, as a client in cybersecurity, often felt like we were treated like bugs and, something to be studied and measured and sort of looked down upon. We don't take that approach. It was frustrating to me as a customer. We don't do it to our clients. So if there was really one big difference, we have, we really tried to push home. It's the people connection. We have some of the best pen testers and offensive and defensive engineers in the world, and none of that means a thing if they can't explain why. Like, why did you run this pen test? It's great that you cracked us open. What does that mean to me? Like, as a bank or as an insurance firm or a
Oh, no,
hospital?
where's the risk?
Yeah, what am I talking about here? Because cyber's a great hole that you can throw money into, but what actually makes a difference? And our experience is that that's often a people related thing. So we focus a lot on the why, not so much the how. The how, frankly, we're using AI at every turn to try and get rid of as much of that as we can, so that humans spend their time on analysis and measurement and comparisons as opposed to data collection. Um, no,
Absolutely.
nothing new in any of that. I think you can hear, echoes of those sentiments elsewhere, but we've really tried to sort of focus it in at ProCircular. We're very good with the technical part of it, but we understand that the important part is that there are humans involved in this that aren't technical. So, our job is to engage, help them understand why, help them to understand what are we trying to accomplish here.
Yeah.
Alan, one of the first things we do in an engagement with a client is a SWOT analysis of the company. It's not meant
Really?
to be like it's not meant to be like a proxy for a full enterprise assessment, but it forces the people in the room, and we try to get HR and GC and, all of the sort of stakeholders from the organization, not just IT. Together, we talk about what are the goals of this organization. If it's a nonprofit, like, who do you serve? What good are you trying to do? And then we weave that into the security program, as opposed to just assuming that this client is the same as all other clients. And, it's about the border and it's about email and it's about all of the standard things that anybody can look into. We really like to understand who we work with, because it enables us to answer the call better. Big problem or small problem. So
Excellent.
that's the long and the short of it, Alan. I hope that helps.
Yeah, no, it did. Just one quick thing, and we'll get it out of the way in case I forget later. For people who want more information on ProCircular, what's the website?
The website is www.procircular.com.
Excellent. All right. Aaron, I wanted to talk to you about what we have as our topic of discussion today. I think it was last week or maybe it was the week before already. I wrote an article that CISA, as well as the NSA and FBI, as it turns out, have withdrawn from participation in the RSAC conference, biggest security conference in the world, where historically it was a great place for private industry and government and the cybersecurity industry to collaborate. And really, that's sort of the second shoe dropping. The first shoe was, I don't want to call it the gutting of CISA, but let's say that they've radically changed the mission of
Yep.
CISA.
Yep.
They did gut the budget by a lot, and that money.
You're using the right words.
Yeah.
I mean, it was when
but
you
they
cut
they also
500
changed the
million.
mission. Yeah, absolutely. And but the mission has changed. Where I actually I look. I know Chris Krebs. I never met Jen Easterly, but I admired her, work from afar. They really, Alan Friedman, S-bombs from CISA, and I knew a lot of people there, and I admired their work because of their ability to bring a public-private consortium to bear on our critical infrastructure needs in this country, understanding that whatever it is, 75% of our critical infrastructure is not actually run by the government. It's private industries, private companies that are, managing this critical infrastructure. And, like Jack Nicholson in he walks the wall and we sleep under in A Few Good Men.
You
We
can't
sleep on,
handle the truth.
yeah, you can't, exactly, right? But we sleep under the blanket of their security that they provide. I worry at night about, right, this public-private partnership is disappearing. Is the mission? Who's responsible for this anymore? You know, can we leave it just to private companies? Do we need some sort of community like an RSAC or someone to kind of try to bring it together? I don't know what the answer is. If I did, I would say so. But Aaron, what are you seeing, or what do you think?
We have very similar concerns, Alan, and from the top all the way down. Um, Normally, I avoid politics like the plague. Right? That is not
As most of us try.
yeah, it's not often a helpful part of a discussion around risk and cybersecurity and so forth. However, in this case, so much of this is, and I'll be polite, we'll call it political volatility, right? So much
Hmm.
of this upheaval and change is having a very real impact on small companies and large companies alike. One of the more telling, I think, concerns I have, and this is where we get into the political part of it. I'll read you something real quick. Heritage Foundation. So everybody talks about this project 2025.
Hmm.
Check this out. CISA is a DHS component that the left has weaponized to censor speech and affect elections at the expense of securing cyber domain and critical infrastructure. So, Alan, you and I travel in similar circles, right? And I have never heard a single member of any part of the CISA organization talk to me about censorship, talk to me about elections, talk to me about anything other than trying to be that last mile for small businesses in this country when it comes to cyber protection, right? So there is this assumption, for whatever reason, and I'm neither defending it nor supporting it, but there's this assumption by a lot of people who are making decisions right now that CISA is some sort of a political organization and that they are spreading what they believe to be disinformation. That has not been my experience at all. And as a result of that, you see all kinds of changes within that organization. The fact of the matter is, when cyber started to become a word that you saw in the news, like 2016, 2017, Hillary's emails, like that's where that all started, right? Um, Everybody was sort of rushing to get their piece. Everybody in federal government was rushing. So you had FBI, you had National Guard show up to the party. You had all these TLAs that have been involved, usually outward facing. You mentioned the NSA. FBI was involved. And CISA was sort of the trying to fit into that equation. But at the end of the day, you have the FBI, which is largely responsible for prosecutions. Like they are cops, they catch bad guys.
Hmm.
Proactive is not their thing. It never has been, right? And that makes perfect sense. I wouldn't want the FBI going around all day looking for crimes they thought might happen, right? Like, let's stick to investigation. National Guard sounds like what it is, which is, critical infrastructure protection but largely around government historically, unless there's a huge disaster. So again, kind of disaster-oriented groups, CISA was going to be, or my conception of it was that CISA was going to be that connection uh, between where private industry protected medium-sized companies and large companies, companies like ProCircular, protect banks and hospitals and all of those folks who have enough revenue that they can afford to do something about it. The hope was that CISA would be the glue that connected all of us in industry and all of us in federal government, and use that to protect that last mile, that um, small Walgreens or a corner shop that has 10 employees. Like, those are the guys that are getting killed out there, not Dell. Dell's going to be fine. Amazon's going to be fine. But that plumbing supply company, they're in serious trouble. And they're a threat to the rest of us as well. So
Absolutely.
The hope was that CISA could be this answer, the federal government's answer to protecting private industry. And it's been completely changed, and it's left a huge vacuum. Like, I don't honestly know who's supposed to fill that in. I'm guessing it's private industry. You would think I'd be excited about that, like as a business guy. But the fact is that some of these organizations, a corner store with 3 or 5 employees, can't afford what we do. My engineers are very, very bright and not cheap. Right?
Well, not only, certainly not, Aaron, and that's always been a problem. A lot of organizations, live below the cyber poverty line, if you will. They can't afford that.
Yes.
And but here's the thing. It also goes, I was a poli-sci major in undergrad. And, why do humans form governments? Because there are certain functions that a government could do because it represents the will of the people and the critical mass of the people that no individuals or individual companies alone can do, right? And things like a common defense. Why we have a Department of Defense, regardless of what you want to call it these days. Why we have a Department of Defense? Why do we have, basic government functions? Is because the government, these are the functions that you need something bigger than the individual to do. Banding together, the social contract. If you want to get back to Locke and Rousseau and all of these things, it's a social contract. The wolf man versus the civilized man, if you remember from school. And then if and in today's world, part of that common defense is a defense of our critical infrastructure from cyber attack. And so to me, that clearly, now make no mistake, the irony should not be lost that the Project 25 and Heritage people are calling out CISA for election fraud when it was, a form, Chris Krebs at CISA was fired for saying there was no fraud in the election.
Yeah, probably because there was no fraud in the election.
For spreading, more than probably, that's pretty clear. Spreading disinformation. Well, Jen Easterly would put in something at CISA to say, hey, we're going to look for disinformation because that's a threat to critical infrastructure. And who's dealing disinformation? Well, we besides the Russian and Chinese and Iranians and North Koreans and all these other bots and their allies. So the irony should not be lost that what they're blaming CISA for was exactly the thing CISA was defending as part of it, right? This is truth speak from 1984 or something.
You hit a really important point. And I'm so gonna dodge all of those topics.
No, you should. That's why I could say it here and you can't. Let me fast forward. We're gonna fast forward. Aaron, you said it. Your company, any company, bigger companies, smaller companies, we can't do this without a partner. Mm-hmm. In Washington, without a partner at the state levels, perhaps. Will we see the states? I mean, that's a logical solution. Perhaps as individual states help form that private-public partnership, at least at the state level or at the local municipalities? What can we expect? How do we facilitate it?
I think that's a start. I think you hit on a really important topic right after we started. The CISA, if nothing else, plays a role in connecting some of those various federal organizations and private industry and private practitioners of cybersecurity. Um, the FBI has a huge role to play in that. I'll give you a really quick firsthand. When we get called out on an incident today, the 5th of February 2026, when a client calls us and says, "Hey, I have a really bad day. I would like you to come to Atlanta right now." When we do that, one of the first things that we look for are not just the threat actor that has been visible, but the variety of threat actors that can also be in an environment, right? You've got access brokers who sell keys. I got a login and password to kind of anyone. So when we get on the scene, yes, we may have a ransomware guy, but we got 2 or 3 other people in there. There may be PHI theft, there may be credit card theft. All of those things are patterns that we need to recognize really quickly. So when one of our folks gets on the ground, the way it used to work is that we would get in touch with the bureau, say, "Hi, this is Aaron. I'm on site at this location. I have this threat actor. Here's what we think they're doing. Here's what the behavior looks like now. What do I need to worry about?" People within the FBI are organized in what are called AORs, and the specific AOR that specializes in that bad guy can tell us all sorts of things that are very helpful to the client. This guy normally exfiltrates data. Watch for that. It's not just ransomware. Or this threat actor really likes credit cards. They don't care about your HR data. So don't worry about that. Those kinds of things real time inform the approach that we have to incident response. When it's difficult to get a call returned from the FBI because those guys have been retasked to 50 different things, we have to go online and work with our colleagues in private industry, rely on our intelligence feed, but it cuts some really valuable real-time information out. The person who pays the bill for that is the client, not us, not the FBI, but the person who their company isn't processing orders or anything like that, right? That they're shut down. That's the net effect of all of this. So CISA, at a minimum, we benefit as a community so much from sharing what we see and what we learn. The bad guys have to be right once. We've got to be right all day long. So coordination and communication is part of how we do that. So I would love to see things like pulling out of RSA. The board that Krebs built with CISA was a great way to get industry and federal to share information to one another. I don't know why you would take that apart, and it has a very real, like, today effect on
Yeah. Unfortunately, I just pray that we don't all pay a huge price before this gets rectified. Anyway, Aaron, we're about out of time, man. What a great conversation.
I
I
really
appreciate you.
appreciate it. Thank you, Alan. Yeah.
Very cool. Come back, keep us posted. Good luck with ProCircular. Again, that's procircular.com. You can see the spelling in the bottom third with Aaron's name. Aaron, I don't know if you'll be at RSA this year, but we'll be there live at Broadcast Alley all week. Maybe stop by and say hello.
I will. I'll see you there, Alan. Thanks.
All righty. Aaron Warner, CEO ProCircular here on Techstrong TV. We'll be back with more in a second.
Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Techstrong.ai Leadership Insights series. I'm your host, Mike Vizora. Today we're with Jeremiah Stone as the CTO for SnapLogic, and we're having a little chat about AI and legacy systems and how we kind of stitch all this stuff together. Jeremiah, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, Mike. It's a really fascinating topic, and we're working with many companies right now that are really grappling with this fundamental question of how do they introduce AI into their existing landscapes and accelerate their businesses and do so in a sort of cost responsible way and get the speed they want without having to throw everything away they've been working on for a long time. So it's a really interesting topic.
Well, that is the nut of the thing, right? So if I look back at everybody's environments, we have applications in some cases that have been running for decades. We're not going to throw those away overnight. And that's where all the data is. And sometimes that data is on premise and sometimes it may be in the cloud. And then we have all these great new AI tools and models, and most of that stuff probably is running in the cloud. And we're trying to mash all this together. So how do I think about this? Or is there maybe a set of best practices that you've seen people adopt to help navigate this stuff?
Well, I think we are starting to see repeatable patterns emerge, and that's often what we look for in these times of rapid technological progress, where we definitely have a high intuition and then start to see proof points of technology starting to really have an impact, and then look for patterns to be able to put that to work that doesn't take another decade to get to work. And I think one of the really interesting things that I'm starting to see, relative to the companies we're working with, is a reevaluation and a different approach to thinking about technology strategy with existing landscapes and trying to isolate the systems that have enormous amounts of value that can move forward, and then systems that need to be refactored, need to be replaced. And the term that we're using quite often these days, and I think it really kind of came out of financial services, is starting to distinguish between legacy systems that are going to need to be put on a timeline for retirement, refactoring, renewal, and heritage systems that need to have an architectural approach that preserves potentially decades of continuous investment, business logic, deep organizational information that is going to carry domain expertise and a high degree of value, but do not need to be refactored and thrown away. And starting to take a more nuanced approach to understanding the existing landscape, and then an architecture that allows us to deliver rapid value and new capabilities, for the business, without getting caught up in business value neutral, sort of shiny object activities, hacker news architecture, I think somebody's called that, that is just the implementation of something because it's contemporary, but not necessarily because it's required.
Is this, when you peel it all back, just a huge exercise in business process reengineering that, we've been trying to get at for decades now, but in the age of AI, may be easier to accomplish, but we're now doing it at a level of scale. And sometimes in production environments, we're just moving ahead and seeing what happens.
But actually, it feels like deja vu for me. I came into the industry in the late 90s, early 2000s, when we were having a very large scale move to local GUI interfaces, three-tier architectures, moving away from mainframes, and saw the rise of a completely different penetration into the workforce with these systems. And we're able to take basically knowledge work really rose at that period of time, and you were able to give people personal computers, but technology on the desktop, and expand what used to be just sort of a terminal operation. Now you're giving technology to every employee. And I think we're in another one of these sort of expansions of high value, high interaction technology being provided in different ways, now via conversational interfaces primarily, but also this idea of digital labor, where we have this entirely new domain of work that can be automated. And it can be automated because predominantly language models are able to handle unstructured, semi-structured data, in addition to what we do well already, which is highly structured data. And so, I think that is what is a redefinition of how do we get to those same outcomes? How do we support new improvements to business processes, taking out cycle time, taking out cost, delivering more value, but apply these technologies in a way that allows to support that. So yeah, I think that I keep thinking back to business process for engineering, business process automation, that we were traditionally looking only at transactional workflows, where we could use a interface that was delivered to the employee to be able to go through checking a purchase order, onboarding an employee, doing other elements of the business. But now we're doing that in a different way to the end user, but also we're able to automate things that we couldn't automate previously without. And we tried with expert systems, but that proved to be far too heavy a lift to be able to do. And now we can do with these new systems. Now, the element of how quickly we can do it and how heavily it's happening at scale, I do think that there is a difference between what is being rushed out into production very, very quickly is what some people refer to as everyday AI, the ability to include these tools in productivity tools, in your document editing system, in your email, in your spreadsheets, et cetera, versus a core business process that is not direct knowledge work, but it's actually something that would have only been in a transactional system. Seeing a ton of the everyday AI, incorporating these systems, all of us, over Christmas, everybody's got I don't know, Claude, running now on their desktops, doing knowledge work, that sort of thing. I've got a couple of windows open on my desktop for stuff that I need to do. But what I'm really starting to see with businesses is now, okay, how do we take these things and now go after those core workflows, maybe create new products, different user experience, different customer experiences, but that has been happening more slowly than the introduction to individual employees. And now we're starting to see these larger, more scalable architectures. Predominantly, I think two things. One is orchestrating across transactional systems using agents as digital labor. Seeing a lot of that in financial services with processes like loan underwriting, other traditionally heavy document-based, personnel-based processes, but then also better ad hoc analysis systems where we're using often a conversational interface like a Slack or Teams or even a self-developed UI, but for doing things that would have typically been a dashboard. Now we're able to use MCP across existing systems to be able to answer a business leader's question or a customer support person's question, et cetera, to be able to increase customer support readiness and customer intimacy, people would say, by decreasing again cycle times to useful information to take action more effectively.
To your point, I think this is maybe occurring in phases. We are seeing employees being more productive because they're using AI tools, but they're also having to spend some additional time maybe cleaning up after those AI tools, what some people occasionally refer to as AI work slop, but on the whole, they're better off. But when I look at the workflows that you're describing with AI agents, I think part of the challenge is that a lot of the workflows are, shall we say, deterministic, and they're supposed to be done the same way 100% of the time. And we have a lot of AI tools that are probabilistic being added to the mix, and well, many of them don't do the same thing the same way twice ever. And I think people are struggling with how to kind of meld those two or figure out, exactly where do I kind of overlay a probabilistic tool to a deterministic process, and well, how deterministic can I make that AI?
Well, yeah, I think it's a very important distinction. And actually, I'm not seeing a lot of value and yield going back at well understood deterministic processes and introducing AI into them other than cross-deterministic process orchestration. What I am seeing a ton of is existing human processes, which were probabilistic already, now getting the value of decreased cycle time, better, basically raising the level of an individual employee. I'll tell you, for example, in our business, one of the things that we really prize is great relationships with our customers because we're operating at the infrastructure layer and it's just high contextual complexity. In principle, middleware is not that complicated. You're connecting a system to system application, or you're taking data from applications and putting them in databases. The technology in the middle isn't complicated. What's incredibly complicated is the context around it. Every customer has different systems. They have different workflows. They have different data extensions they've made, et cetera. So for our staff, maintaining a level of deep individual customer understanding and getting that understanding before you have a conversation with the customer is pretty onerous. It means going back and reading all the information about the customer, reading all the customer records, those sorts of things. And when we have turnover or our customer has turnover, you have to reestablish those relationships and reestablish an understanding of the customer. We've developed a system we call Sonar, which reads across 15, 20 different areas of data, and then creates automated updates to a customer service representative or to myself as a sponsor of a customer on a monthly, weekly, or even an event-driven basis. It just increases the ambient knowledge of what's happening in the business. That was already a non-deterministic, human-centric process. We were already trying to do it. We've been working forever. There's a core value of the company, but now we've been able to add AI and basically take the toil of going and reading Salesforce, reading Zendesk, reading our other information, and having that abstractly summarized and provided up to us as is been completely transformative in terms of taking these lossy processes out of individual burden of work and then putting it into an automated system. That wasn't a transactional process. It wasn't something that was well handled in aggregate across the different systems, but now we're able to get value there. On the other hand, have we radically changed the way we onboard a new vendor? Not yet, but even within that transactional process, there are things like credit checks, risk scoring, or other types of things that typically would have involved a person in our finance department to look at these things. We can now establish individual workflows that, again, this is a probabilistic judgment on whether the vendor meets these particular criteria that a human would have had to do. We can now automate those and have evaluations within those individual workflows that give us a level of confidence that they were performing well. Do I think you're going to do your gross to net or your general ledger operations or your payroll using a language model? No, I just don't think there's a lot of value there. What's challenging the industry, however, is that for the last 30 years, we've been stuck in these common business processes that became best practice in the last BPR wave. And it's almost like we as professionals have to go back and reread the books from the late 90s and early 2000s when we created these processes and apply that same mindset to an entirely new domain of opportunity.
I also think that a lot of business leaders thought that if they invested in AI, that they were going to see some massive ROI and there'd be some competitive advantage. But as we get into it, I can't help but start to look around a little bit and figure out that, well, a lot of this stuff is just the new table stakes, right? Everybody's trying to automate the same processes. And so I have to distinguish between an AI investment that I'm going to make just to stay competitive and the one that I might think is actually going to, give me some sort of sustainable advantage. But I'm not sure everybody has a firm handle on what those are.
I think you're right. I think the table stakes are the efficiency outcomes. So where we can gain more efficiency in processes, where we can run leaner, where we can essentially, instead of looking for a labor cost arbitrage, I think that was table stakes previously. Are you offshoring? Are you nearshoring for certain non-core portions of the business? I heard somebody refer to it as digital shoring. I don't know if that works, but automating using essentially a language model in a loop, an agent to be able to do these things. I think that's table stakes. I think that is where it's just expected in business to be competitive. What I think we really haven't seen a lot of great examples of are new types of services, new types of things that actually increase the top line, that improve the business through new products, new services, different ways of growing the business or creating new value. And I think that's still an area where we're working harder. I do think that there are examples of that underway, and there are folks working on this. But think back to how I would guess predictive analytics really had massive changes, and you think about, I don't know, originally when Uber was just a good idea, it was, could we locate the car, the black car originally, before there were ever individuals involved? Could you predict where the ride demand would be? Create an entirely new industry, a new way of doing things. I think that moment is still to come, for language model based systems where we see things. Where it's really happening right now is in the software development space. I think that's the first really interesting product market fit where you have fundamentally different ways of doing things, where you look at spec-driven development tools like AWS Hero or other things that come out, what Cloud Code is doing right now. We're definitely seeing, an emergence there, but, more broadly in the economy, I think it's still early days.
Mm-hmm. So as we kind of noodle this all for a minute, do you think we will start to see the flattening of organizations because as workflows change maybe my sales and marketing motion is tighter, and maybe my salespeople are creating their own collateral instead of waiting for the marketing department. But that's just one example. But today, the way organizations are structured is around some time-honored things, right? There's sales, marketing, manufacturing, whatever. Will we flatten that in the age of AI?
Social norms changing is hard, right? Those things are pretty durable. I do think that we're continuing on an arc that we've been on for quite some time, which is more empowerment of the individual. And I do think that, certainly these tools put more capabilities in the talented, motivated, creative individual to not have dependencies on the product marketing team to be able to help build a collateral deck or something like that. On the other hand, it is, you mentioned AI slop earlier, it very much is an age where the more seasoned, higher expertise individuals are getting a lot more out of these tools than individuals that don't have the domain expertise or capability to utilize them. So, I think in some ways, I'm wondering if very talented individuals with a great deal of expertise that may have, been put in managerial positions, that there would be almost a return to individual contribution. And yes, flattening in that sense, that we'll have more player coach type organizations where, because you've managed to take a lot of the administrative overhead in some cases out, you're able to then take these more seasoned individuals and put them into the front line. Go back to my project owner example here at SnapLogic. I definitely think our customer success leaders are more client facing now because they're doing less administrative stuff in the back end. Does that ultimately lead to less hierarchy and leaner, tighter organizations? I think it certainly could, and I think that's what we've seen traditionally. As you gain more and more productivity, you have less and less need for just large employee populations, and that requires less hierarchy and less administrative control. On the other hand, I don't think there's ever been a greater need for good leadership and leadership and guidance when you have such a fast, dynamic market. The burden and pressure on consistent direction, clarity of goals, and execution is I think more profoundly felt than ever. I think that's what we see continuously, is now we're having to improve our processes around corrective action plans, around program management, those sorts of things, because following through and ensuring that the outcome is achieved, these tools don't fix that element of the process. And that's, to a large extent, the responsibility of management, of leadership, is to ensure longer arc delivery and outcomes.
Mm-hmm. So what is that one thing you see people doing these days that just makes you shake your head a little bit and go, folks, I think we need to be a little bit smarter than that?
It's hard to pick. I think there's a lot of that going on. I do think that the widespread, next year knowledge work will be obsolete, we'll have a large technical unemployment. I shake my head at that. I'm just not seeing it. In fact, what I'm seeing is almost a Jevons paradox, that the more productive these tools get, the more demand there will be for people to actually develop these systems. And I think that what people are not doing is really seeking to invest in upskilling and deeper education for how to use these tools, and doing better workforce planning and management. So I think now is the time to be really recruiting and hiring new grads. And I think that there's been a lot of stories where companies are deferring bringing new graduates into the workforce. And I think that's going to hurt companies, because as we see this explosion of creativity, development, and growth, that you're going to want to continue to build out the ability for people to develop and deliver these systems. And so even though we have individual productivity increasing, we also have this huge expansion of the domain of things we can now go after and improve with these technologies. And I think the thing that shakes my head is the pause on investing in talent and coaching and growing the early and mid career individuals. And I think that's more important than ever, given these tools.
All right, folks, you heard it here. hey, maybe the smart play after all is to invest in the people first and the AI will follow. Jeremiah, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you very much, Mike. It's been a fun conversation.
All right. And thank you all for watching the latest episode of the Techstrong.ai Leadership Insight series. You can find this and others on our website. We invite you to check all those out. Until then, we'll see you next time.
Amazon AI investments again. Versus stops AI leaks. States are not okay with AI. Zscaler dances with Square X. Google API, AI, oh my, oh why. AWS gets hacked in 8 minutes. And we're going to take a closer look at some of the EU AI moves in this week's episode of the Tech Field Day Rundown. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Tech Field Day Rundown. It is February the 11th, and I am already tired of saying AI. But I wanted to let you all know that it is National Make a Friend Day, but I don't need to do that because you're all my friends. Because you all show up every Wednesday to listen to the rundown that I record with my other good friend, Mr. Alistair Cook. Al, it's good to see you again.
It is a pleasure to be here on such a beautiful morning.
Yeah, we'll go with that. It's funny because for some people, it's a cold, miserable morning that they need a latte. For others, that it is so hot outside that we wouldn't even think about drinking coffee. But the good news is that all of the stories that we have are both hot and cool for whatever you might need. And we're going to start off by talking about everybody's favorite subject, hyperscalers, and billions of dollars that they're using to build out for generative AI. Boy, this seems like the never-ending story that will probably eventually end with a small popping noise. For now, though, we chose the AWS news that we've linked in the show notes article to represent all of those billions of dollars that still seem to be committed to building a home for some future AI application, we think, we hope. Are we getting jaded with these announcements, as you could tell by my read-in from the story, or are these still vital investments in the future of AWS's clients' businesses?
Time will tell. We don't know. We really don't. At this stage, it is an investment in the future that many of us are very skeptical about. As you can tell, Tom is one of the most skeptical about this. And we've heard these stories so much. It really is getting kind of dull to hear of another $200 billion being spent as part of maybe $500 billion. That's $500 billion of spend amongst the three big cloud vendors that just in 2026. So we've seen announcements that are about 3 years worth of commitment to building things. We've seen announcements that are about huge amounts of power being contracted. This continues to be a big bet that AI is going to be transformative, and specifically generative AI using the tool sets that we currently have is going to be transformative for how people operate their businesses over the next few years. And yeah, it does seem like maybe things are getting overhyped, that maybe we're getting to the point where we covered last week that there'd been a little bit of pushback on Oracle, that they're having trouble borrowing some of these hundreds of billions of dollars that they need for their build out. So maybe there is some challenges going on here. What we have seen is some actual returns, some actual value being delivered by these AI applications. And so quietly what's going on is businesses are actually using AI to generate value. Quite a lot of the time, it's not generative AI. Quite a lot of the time, it's old-fashioned machine learning, or what we refer to as predictive AI. But there are absolutely some use cases where generative AI is providing some real value. We've seen some of that being covered very quietly. It doesn't get nearly as much noise when you actually become profitable or more profitable in your business compared to these hundreds of billions of dollars. So I think, I hope I will have the courage to take a break from bringing any of these massive purchase stories until somebody is spending over $1 trillion on AI. And I know Tom will keep me honest on that one. But in the meantime, I hope to bring you some more stories of businesses that are getting value out of these large spends. Because in the end, nobody's getting value from it. It is going to be quite a loud popping sound when the patience runs out. Versa has added some new capabilities to its universal SASE platform to better detect and protect sensitive data being shared with AI tools. The update improves text analysis and adds OCR to inspect text that's actually in images, like inside some of those terrible PDF documents that are just scanned images. And it uses AI, the tool uses AI to reduce alert noise and improve threat detection. These features help organizations secure their data and manage new AI-related risks without adding separate security tools. I think as we start to see AI in the core of both protection and operation, I think that's a good thing for us, Tom.
I think it is. And the reason why it's so valuable is because you know those policies that you have in place that say don't upload company documents to a public AI repository like Claude or ChatGPT or anything like that? Yeah, do you think those are being followed? Because I have proof that even the head of CISA didn't even follow those and uploaded sensitive government information to a public AI repository. So how are you going to prevent that from happening? Because shadow AI is how we got into this mess in the first place when people started playing around with it. Well, that is a combination of two things. I've already talked in the past about companies that are detecting tokenization and invalidating those tokens, but that's very invasive. If you already have a perimeter security setup like you would if you were using some kind of an SD-WAN appliance, you can do this because part of the SD-WAN SASE SSE platform, SASE in this particular case, is the ability to do security scanning at the edge. And if you think, oh, well, being able to detect data being uploaded is that new? No, we used to call that data loss prevention or DLP. And in the old days, it was looking for very specific things. It was looking for social security numbers that were being sent in emails. I was looking for credit card numbers that were being sent in the clear text of an email or in an attachment. Again, these are very important things, and we definitely want to stop them. But the game has been upped now for us looking for data that's being uploaded to unauthorized organizations. And in those cases, that would be, chatgpt.com or anthropic.com or anywhere that's running some kind of a system that I may not want my data being uploaded to. You're probably thinking to yourself, well, that's probably a good idea, but I would never use one of those things. Says the person running Windows 11, because you're probably uploading data to Microsoft's Copilot and you don't even realize it. And that's part of the problem, is that a lot of times these agents are sending data where we may not expect them to be sent. And we saw that from things like Claudebot, Moltbot, OpenClaw, whatever we're calling it this week, where it would actually go out and proactively try to find things that it could be used to do. There was actually a great video that I saw where it was talking about how Moltbot would go out and it would actually try to, say, hey, I want to create an API integration with this insulin pump company to measure your system so that I can send you a text alert whenever your blood sugar gets too low. Well, if the system did that all on its own, that means that there had to be communications and calls and things like that. What if it accidentally sent all your patient information into the cloud or pulled it down and uploaded it someplace you didn't want it to go? Yeah, that's not a HIPAA violation because you're not a provider, but you may not want your medical information being uploaded in places that you don't want it to be. And so by creating these perimeter systems to prevent that data from being uploaded both with your consent or without it, that helps organizations kind of overcome this desire to just feed everything to an AI system and vibe code security breaches, because that's kind of what you're doing. I honestly believe that more people should be taking a very close look at what data is actually being uploaded to these places and probably scream in horror when they realize they really don't want people to find that out. So props to my friends over at Versa for taking a close look at this. I know Kelly Ahuja has been a presenter at Tech Field Day many times, and he has a very unique grasp on the SD-WAN and SASE community. And I'm sure that this is something that a lot of companies have been asking for, and I'm glad that they're delivering it. We're going to take a trip over to New York State because they are the latest state to consider forcing a pause on building all of these new data centers. I don't know if you've heard this or not, but there is a massive build out of said data centers. And the reason for it is, do I even need to say it? AI. That's putting pressure on a range of essential resources. Several states are considering restricting planning permission to prevent increases in power prices, in water demands, and conservation of the land from other productive uses. Many of the loudest voices are concerned about the environmental impact of these new data centers. Now, Al, the question that I have is, are we going to see data centers being built elsewhere? I know we've seen some people that have considered building them under the ocean, and Lord knows that every supervillain is obsessed with building them in space.
we know that building them in space is just plain stupid, but building under the sea seemed to work, but nobody's carrying on. So, yeah, we're still going to see these things on land. This pushback in New York is just the latest of a series. There's been wider. Other states have been doing this at state level, including Virginia, Georgia, Maryland, and Oklahoma. And then we've also seen this in local communities as well. There have been previous stories that I've read of this being in state hand or in county hands rather than in state hands. The whole point here is that local communities don't really like the idea that there are going to be massive data centers soaking up a lot of the resources that they would otherwise rely on. And power and cooling are a couple of the really big ones. There's some concerns that there aren't enough environmentally sound power sources for these massive build-outs. So yeah, there's some real concerns in a variety of communities spread across the entire country about these data centers being built out, the impact of these data centers on local communities, local resources, and the wider environment. The story is going to continue. I think we'll see more of these stories of people basically saying, not in my backyard. But maybe this is more than just straight up NIMBYism. Maybe this is a stand against what we possibly think might be a bit of a bubble going on with these builds, and that nobody really wants a half-built and then abandoned data center right next to their town center. So yeah, this is definitely a speed bump for a lot of the companies that are wanting to build out these data centers, and they want to build them close to where the large populations are. And of course, that's where resources tend to be scarce. It's a real chicken and egg kind of challenge for them. It's just going to increase the cost of your AI if you end up getting value for that AI. Zscaler has acquired the browser security firm SquareX to extend zero trust protections directly into standard web browsers. The deal integrates SquareX browser-based threat detection into Zscaler's zero trust exchange, helping protect users from phishing, malicious extensions, and data leakage from AI tools. AI is everywhere. Again, all of this without requiring enterprise-managed browsers and secure legacy VPNs to tunnel everything through the slow core of your network. Did I say it's slow? The core of your network is not slow, is it, Tom?
Well, you'd hope it wouldn't be, but that's not where you want to be scanning for this stuff anyway, because you want those packets to fly across there as fast as possible. And I have been talking to Vivek and the people over at SquareX for quite a while. In fact, you probably saw them present last year at Security Field Day. And the biggest question that always gets raised is, why do you want to create a secure browser? As you're watching this from Safari or Chrome or Firefox, you're probably watching it on a WebKit or a Chromium browser, because that's literally the only two browsers that are left. They're all using the same rendering engines. All of the applications that we use are browser-based. Using Slack, guess what, kids? That's Electrum. That's a browser-based app. It's just the browser is locked down and it's on your system and it doesn't look like a browser. So why wouldn't you want to protect that? It goes back to the story we talked about with the SASE gateway. If you know all of your traffic's going through one place, why don't you just scan at that location? And I love the fact that SquareX is like, we're not going to use those stupid VPNs. By the way, if anybody needs to know, like, tunnels are the duct tape of the internet, because if you can't make something work, force it through a tunnel, and then you can do things to it. And they don't want to do that. Instead, what they do is they have an agent that lives inside of a browser, and it enforces security protocols. And when you think about a corporate laptop, that is absolutely perfect, because I'm not going to let you download other stuff, right? If you're supposed to be using Edge, you're going to use Edge. If you're supposed to be using Chrome, you're going to use Chrome. And I think most people are using Chrome. I don't think anybody's using Edge. But what it allows this now to do is to integrate with the rest of the Zscaler platform, right? Because that's Zscaler's thing. They are the SSE king, all of these security services. So it's loaded into your browser with Zscaler's plugins, and now you can do content filtering, you can do redirection, you can do posture assessment, you can do all of that stuff. This was a really good exit from the team over at SquareX. You know how it is, like you create a product and you think to yourself, man, I would love to see this being used in a platform. And that's exactly what Zscaler said. This is the next frontier. Everybody uses a browser now, whether they realize it or not. And this is a great way to provide security for that without having to install tons and tons of plugins and agents. You just use what SquareX has already developed and delivered, And that allows you to provide a secure workspace for everybody. So I'm, again, big shout out to the team over at SquareX, and I'm excited to see where this goes with Zscaler. And Zscaler, we'd love to see you at Security Field Day, so give me a call. We're going to be talking about our friends over at Google because they have released a new Developer Knowledge API, which allows coding assistants to directly access the latest Google documentation. What, you may not have to Google for it? The new API provides programmatic access to Google documentation rather than relying on the version that was available when the model was originally trained. Does this mean that we're going to see more APIs to provide assistance to assistants doing things so that they have the most current documentation?
Yes. Yes, it does.
Sweet.
And it's awesome. This is the right application of the MCP standard, the standard for allowing one AI tool to gather data out of some other tool, whether it's another AI or in this case, it's a set of documentation. This is absolutely awesome. As background, you're probably aware that large language models take a lot of compute power and a lot of time to build, and they only know about what was in their training data at the time that they were built. So if I'm using a large language model that was built 6 months ago, that's great for working with enterprise software where there probably hasn't been a new version in the last 6 months. So it knows maybe my old version of maybe on-premises installed Word. But cloud services are constantly updating. That's why software companies love delivering things as a software as a service, because they can always have the latest, most secure, most up-to-date version running. And that means that there's a newer version than when your large language model was trained. So your coding assistant is not aware of the changes. This ability to link your coding assistant to Google's canonical source of truth of what the current state of all of their services and the way you interact with them. This is awesome. And we will see more of this. We will see this same kind of capabilities turning up for anywhere that we need to have our code integrate with something that updates reasonably frequently. Myself, I do a bit of embedded development, so working with microcontrollers and having access to the latest information about both the libraries that work with my microcontrollers, but also having my AI coding assistant able to directly access the documentation for the specific microcontroller I'm using now. That will be really beneficial to me. It's one of the reasons I'm looking at using some sort of AI coding assistant, maybe for some of my embedded projects. But it doesn't just have to be documentation. It can also be around the capabilities of every other microservice within your organization. You could have this segregation where the tool that is being used to develop one microservice doesn't read the source code of all of the other microservices. It just has access to an interface to the documentation of their interfaces. If you're building microservices to talk to one another, each microservice should treat the other one like a black box. It shouldn't know what's going on inside it. It should only know what the API is to access. So again, this kind of programmatic access for your AI assistant to know the interfaces, the capabilities that it should interact with is something we will see more and more of. And it will significantly help to make these AI coding assistants better. Whether they're good now or great now, we've had some interesting reports. We've had some great reports about improvements in AI coding assistants over the last 2 years since we've been looking at this kind of space. So they're there, they're creating code, and hopefully tools like these MCP servers to provide access to up-to-date information are going to improve the quality of that code over time. Security researchers at SysTig report that attackers used AI tools to breach a company's AWS environment and gain admin access in under 10 minutes. By exploiting exposed credentials and automating reconnaissance and privilege escalation with a large language model, the attackers rapidly moved through the cloud identities and accessed sensitive services. The incident highlights how AI is accelerating cloud attacks and raising the stakes for credential management and runtime security. AI is making it much easier to attack you when you're bad at IT. Hopefully, you aren't exposing credentials, Tom.
Yeah, hopefully I'm not. And hopefully no one else is either. Here's the problem, and this is actually, I recorded this in this week's episode of Security Boulevard. If you're not subscribed, please go do so, securityboulevard.com, and just look for the podcast. If there's one thing that humans are really, really bad at, okay, there's a lot of things that humans are really, really bad at, but one of the things that they think they're actually really good at is math. It turns out, no, you are not. Isaac Newton was good at math because he invented math, some of it. You, average user, are really, really crappy at math, and I'll tell you why. You know how we've always been telling you guys for years and years and years that you need to make your passwords longer and you need to add things like uppercase and lowercase letters? If you actually go out and look right now, if your password is 6 characters long and consists of only numbers, it can be instantly cracked. As in, a single GPU, if you can find one or rent one from the cloud, will instantly crack your password. And realistically speaking, just adding lowercase and uppercase letters would lengthen that to about a month for a single GPU to crack it. You're probably thinking, okay, cool, I've got a month. No, you don't. You know why? Because I can rent 50 GPUs. Do the math. I can crack it in less than a day now because I can parallelize that workload. Now, what if I could rent more than 50? What if I could rent 100? What if I could rent 1,000? You're probably thinking to yourself, well, man, renting 1,000 GPUs is super expensive, isn't it? Uh-huh. You know who has a lot of money? Hacking groups and nation-state backed actors and people who really, really, really want to get in. Now, imagine this. Some company rents a crapload of GPUs from Microsoft and uses it to hack Amazon, or rents a whole bunch of GPUs from Google, or TPUs in Google's case, and uses them to hack Microsoft Azure. Why would they ever want to do that? Well, one thing, you're distributing the workload, and all you're doing is you're running a security scan, right? You're checking the hash value of this password. But realistically, what you're doing is you're parallelizing the workload. If you're my age and Al's age, you might remember a little project called SETI at Home, or maybe even Folding at Home. Remember when we were leveraging every screensaver on the planet to try to find proteins in alien life? That's what we're doing here, except we're doing this at a massive scale and we're making it very, very easy to do. And that's the problem. Again, humans are bad at math. They do not understand that when you double the amount of computing power that's being dedicated to a resource, it's trivially easy to compromise something. 10 minutes, folks. If anything, if there is even the smallest like hole in the armor, it's going to find it and it's going to exploit it instantly. You know how if you've ever seen like any kind of discussion of things like von Neumann machines, or the nanobot gray plague kind of thing, you know that once it hits critical mass, it's the next iteration that causes disaster. So it goes from like a half-life to a full life instantly. And that's our problem. If it took 20 minutes for this to happen, before, it now takes 10, which means the next time it will probably only take 5, because these things get better. They learn, they grow, and these people who are programming them are probably getting better at prompting them on what to look for, right? Look for sensitive secrets that are being held in the wrong spot. Analyze GitHub repos. Pull all the information out that you can. That means you've just got to get better at defending all of your stuff. And yeah, I know I hate to say it, but you're going to have to involve some AI tools to fight fire with fire, because if the AI tools can catch the easy stuff before you let it get out, then that means that the people who are trying to get into your system are going to have a harder time, if only because they don't get to have the easy wins. So we're going to have to do a lot better about this. And that includes the providers. So Amazon, specifically, all my buddies that still work at Amazon, remember how I've been telling you for years that you needed to make S3 buckets private by default? And you know how you finally did that? And I'm taking full credit for that, by the way. Like that's all on me. You should put my name on there. You need to start doing these things. You need to have automated checks that run against systems before they are put live, and make sure that nobody has any of these easy to do things. And luckily in these cases, because researchers publish all their information, guess what you have? You have a roadmap to figure out what they got into and how they got into it. And you can tell your customers, don't save your password there. People are going to find it. It's the only way we're going to get through this. And I hope that we don't end up with a gray plague of von Neumann machines, because that's going to be terrible. You know what's not terrible, though? A closer look, because we had something we wanted to take a look at. And I thought it was kind of interesting because it kind of speaks to the market right now. We're not going to do this in the US, though. We're going to go somewhere that actually has regulations. You know, the EU. Because they are taking action against our friends over at Meta over concerns that they are restricting competition by blocking third-party AI assistants in WhatsApp. The European Commission says that Meta's recent policy changes may potentially violate EU antitrust rules, and they are considering interim measures to restore access for rival AI developers while their investigation continues. Now, look, people in the US, I know you don't know anything about this, but there is a program called WhatsApp that pretty much everybody not in the US uses to communicate with each other. And it's owned by Meta. And one of the things that Meta wants to do is put AI in everything because they can use that as a way to justify all this massive spend that they're doing. But one of the problems is that if Meta only wants to put their AI models in WhatsApp, and other companies are like, but we want to do that too. And if Meta restricts that, something monopoly, something antitrust. Again, a foreign concept to most people who live in the US, but I want to get the perspective of someone who doesn't live in the US. Al, do you think that the EU is onto something here by saying, no, if you want to put AI in these tools, you have to let everybody put AI in these tools?
Well, I think the key thing that's gone on here is that there has been a change in Meta's rules. So last October, 15th of October, Meta announced an update to their business solution terms. So not just the general Meta, but Meta Business Solutions terms. And it effectively means that the only AI assistant available in WhatsApp is Meta's Meta AI. And that's as of the 15th of January. So this has been in play for a couple of weeks now. Looking at the EU, the European Commission site, their objection is that, this is a change to what you allowed to block competitors. It's not that there've never been competitors providing AI assistance in WhatsApp. You're now actively blocking those competitors. Well, that's very clearly an anti-competitive move. And I think it would be a very different status if there had never been any way to have a different AI assistant inside WhatsApp. And yes, for those of you who live in the US or live entirely in an Apple kind of space where you can use iMessage to message people over the internet, WhatsApp is that equivalent for people who don't use exclusively iPhones, who are using, in particular, I used WhatsApp a lot when I was traveling to the US with to the US and to Europe with my Android device, because it was the easiest way to message anybody I knew without having to work out which country I was actually making the call from. I just needed an internet connection. WhatsApp absolutely is incredibly useful. And I'm kind of relieved that it's owned by Meta rather than some shady organization from some shady other country. However, this kind of behavior, it sits along with what we'd expect from Meta. They want us and everybody to be using their AI. They want all of our information to be feeding their AI as well. Because remember, if you're not paying to use the AI, well, you're paying with your data rather than your wallet. Tom, have you used WhatsApp as you've traveled around the world? I know internally within the Tech Field Day team, we extensively use iMessage, so the utility for WhatsApp is a little lower. But I'm interested to see if you've used it a bit.
I have used it on and off. My preference is not to use it. I prefer to use Signal for most everything because, again, it's not owned by a shady wannabe billionaire who created a website to rate how hot college students were that he then turned into a global ad empire that is creating filter bubbles that might be ruining society. But who am I to judge about that? I agree with you. Here's the problem in a nutshell. You can create a platform that people want to use. We've seen that happen so many times over the years. SAP, Salesforce, iMessage, Zoom, you name it. What you can't do is change the rules to lock everybody out because suddenly you want to harvest all of the data that's being sent in that platform for your own needs. Now, they had a little bit of a problem at the beginning because the biggest selling point for things not WhatsApp, namely iMessage and Signal, was that little thing called end-to-end encryption. We've had this debate many, many times. End-to-end encryption means that the provider in the middle cannot see any of your messaging information. It means that they can't do things like analyzing it for, ad functionality or, that kind of stuff. Yeah, I like that idea. I don't like the idea of forcing me to use your AI model when I want to ask a question. Because when I ask that AI model that question, that means that you get to collect the data on the exchange between those two things. Yeah, like the rest of the people that Mark Zuckerberg is idolizing, like the Sam Altmans of the world that are doing that. Oh, hey, by the way, did you see that ChatGPT is now has ads for the free tier? Yeah, I wonder where those ads are going to come from. They're probably going to come from the things that you asked ChatGPT about. And that's the value is you remember in the old days with Facebook, the breakthrough in advertising was I'll just serve you ads based on things you hit the like button on, right? Because I can request a whole bunch of information there. But even that's not enough now because people use likes like currency, like this post, and you'll get a free this or that. They're using it to drive engagement. So people might actually like that thing. They may just be using it as a way to gain free things or follow a post or something like that. But if I'm specifically asking a platform for a thing, that is kind of a direct intention, right? Like we've all seen it. If we start Google searching for cars of a specific kind, suddenly all of our ads turn into those cars. But if I were to log into an AI platform and ask it, which is better, this 4-cylinder engine or the 6-cylinder engine, then the system knows, oh, he's probably shopping for a car. Which cars have those engines? I'm going to serve him ads from those locations. Again, this is how they're going to pay for it. The trick is that if you want to not fall on the wrong side of regulation, you have to allow me to use whatever I want. And nobody is immune from this. Apple's had this problem for a while. We've had ChatGPT integration for an entire version of iOS. We're reportedly going to get integrations with Google Gemini very soon. But you cannot lock people out exclusively because that's what everybody wants to do. The problem with all of this, if I could stand even higher on my soapbox for just a minute, is not that these tech billionaire bros want to make AI invade our lives. It's that they want their AI to invade our lives exclusively. Elon wants you to use XAI and Grok. Zuck wants you to use whatever Meta's using, Llama or something. Altman really wants you to use OpenAI for everything because that is the value. That is their competitive advantage, that they have the data that nobody else does and they can't get it out anywhere. But if it's very easy for me to go up to the radio button and say, I want to switch from using ChatGPT to Gemini, then they're locked out and they're trying to make their platform sticky. And I hate to say it, because again, this is a little bit of the political step on the soapbox. It appears that the people in the places where these things are being built don't seem to care. And so we once again rely on the EU, who actually seem to give a damn about regulations and fairness, to say, nope, that's not going to fly. And they're going to institute these things. And by the way, the reason why the EU doing it, why it feels like it means more, is because they don't just fine you a few $1 million as a way to say, look, we are going to slap you on the wrists. They're fining them a percentage of their annual revenue. They really make it hurt, which means people really don't want to do that. And one of the things that we're starting to find out is it turns out that EU regulations actually have a lot to do with making things better. If you don't believe me, think about GDPR and look at CCPA, which was instituted in California, which is very much closely related to GDPR. Our lives are probably better because of that. And yeah, I know clicking on the allow all cookies pop up every time you go to a website feels kind of stupid, but would you rather be clicking on it and knowing that there are cookies, or would you rather be blissfully ignorant of what's going on?
Give me blissful ignorance, man. Just protect me without me ever having to think about it. And that's one of the things that the EU does seem to like to do, is to provide common sense protection for everybody as a sort of fundamental right. I like it. Something else I really like is Tech Field Day events, and I'll be back in the US for Cloud Field Day 25 on the 11th and 12th of March. We're going to have a great time there. The delegate panel and the sponsor panels are both building up beautifully, and stay in touch with us. Keep an eye out on the Tech Field Day website as we update who all is going to be joining us there. Of course, then Tom gets to travel, although you're not traveling to California in March, are you?
Well, no, I am. I'm going to San Francisco because that's where RSAC is. I love Moscone and Union Square, and apparently in the news as of late, the Tenderloin. It's okay. But we're going to be there for RSAC, the RSAC conference. It's not RSA conference anymore. But we have great presentations coming up from Beam, Object First, Commvault, and probably more. We're going to be listing those people on the website as soon as we confirm their participation. And we're also going to be listing our delegates, our friends like Sky Fugate and Shala Denise. They're going to be there. And we love to hear what they have to say about the state of security. And I'll probably be hanging out, talking to some people. I might crash one of Alan Schimmel's parties. You never know. Just look for me randomly invading a podcast somewhere. The important thing is that I'm going to enjoy the fine March San Francisco weather, if there is such a thing. And then I'm going to take a couple of weeks off for break, and then I'm going to come back once again to Silicon Valley because we're going to be talking about networking field day. This is going to be big. 3 days, April 8th, 9th, and 10th. We have some great conversations that are going to be going on. You can see a list of the people who are going to be there, presenters and delegates, on techfieldday.com. Just click on the link for Networking Field Day. And by the way, that's Networking Field Day 40. XL, baby. We hit it. We are going to have to start using Roman numerals. It's going to be wonderful. And then we're going to have to start doing it in hex because, we need to preserve as much space as we can. What you also need to preserve is time on your calendar every Wednesday because that was when you get to watch the Tech Field Day rundown. We're going to publish those episodes on YouTube. We're going to put them up in your favorite podcast application of choice. And we're also going to put the show notes up so you can check out the stories that we link to and read those. The rundown is also streamed on Techstrong TV if that is your preferred place to watch it. And don't forget that Al and I also spend a lot of time on other Techstrong and Futurum Group properties like the Security Boulevard podcast or the Tech Field Day podcast. We're going to be back next Wednesday to talk about all of the IT news of the week that was, and we get to show off our Valentine's Day presents if they're cool. Until then, for myself, Tom Hollingsworth, and Alistair Cook, and as well as all of the people who bring you the Tech Field Day rundown, thanks for tuning in. We sincerely appreciate it, and we'll be back next week.
Phil Menez here, go-to-market execution lead at Vast Data. And today we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the things we're doing beyond storage. So again, Vast really launched our product to the world here in 2019. We were founded in 2016 on the basis of this new shared everything architecture that really breaks the scale and efficiency challenges that customers are facing as they bring legacy challenges or architectures into AI. First thing that we did was build a storage product. Then we added a database product that rides right on top of that architecture. Now I have the capability to have structured data next to unstructured data. Think about the world of having vector database local to where the actual source data is. And beyond that, we've now started to bring more compute in to figure out how customers can execute models and build agents. And we're going to talk about some of these things today. We only have a little bit of time. So one of the things that we have seen, common theme that's coming up, and I mentioned shared nothing shows up everywhere, not just storage, but eventing infrastructure. Eventing is becoming really critical to inference infrastructure. And that really is in two ways. One, it's like events are happening. That's how my AI knows things are changing. So someone's purchasing something, a stock price is changing, an IoT event has tripped, right? Something's broken. But what we're also seeing is all these players that are actually deploying inference at scale are using eventing for feedback on how the user experience is, right? How long did it take to give me that answer? If I gave the customer, do you like this answer or that answer? What data that is. So all the data around the user experience, how these models are working, is being sent home via eventing infrastructure, right? And because eventing infrastructure is based on shared nothing, we see these scaling challenges, right? I'm a legacy storage guy. I had to learn about eventing infrastructure at Vast. It is very complicated, right? When I scale eventing infrastructure, again, I'm breaking up my data across different nodes. Every node's a broker. That node owns a partition, which is like a piece of what we're capturing in eventing. And partitions, brokers own partitions. There's ordering of eventing infrastructure is only maintained within a partition, right? So I can guarantee data in a partition came in order. This one came first, that one came second. I can't guarantee which one came first in a separate partition. So it's really complicated to build this out. My main example for that is you need something called a zookeeper to keep all this stuff working, right? Because this stuff is like wild animals. Very difficult to scale. And ultimately, what you generally see is customers having to break up their eventing infrastructure into smaller clusters, right? We see a lot of write amplification here. We use something called replication to keep that data. What if a server fails? write comes in. I've got to write that to generally 2 different other servers, exploding capacity, really killing utilization. And then the other problem here is that the analytics on eventing infrastructure, super weak. It's really hard to query this stuff because it's not in like a table form. It's basically like a long run-on sentence where every event is a new word. So I have to, if I'm doing analytics, I've got to go out to all the different nodes and really like replay the events that happen looking for the data I'm looking for. So customers don't really do analytics on this. And that means depending on how quickly that data moves from my eventing infrastructure into a data lake, I might have a 15-minute gap or hours-long gap between I have real insights into what's happening in real time. As we're moving to more real-time AI, I want to be able to act on things that are happening now. Someone's stealing something, something's on fire, whatever it is, I want to be able to act on it now. So the shared nothing architecture not only solves the scaling challenges of storage, also solves the scaling challenges of eventing infrastructure because I now have this parallel architecture. I have the compute layer, right? Everything that lands in the system is ACID, right? So we will tell you what order everything came in across partitions. We don't have to worry about any of that. We have NVMe parallel access to every single device in the system. That means I don't have to worry about any of that ownership ordering. What we actually do is take data that's events, and every topic, that's like what we're talking about in terms of eventing infrastructure. A topic's usually broken up into partitions, and every topic is a table in the vast database living on that day's architecture. And every new event is a row. And something I learned about databases, row-based databases are really good for capturing data. Column-based databases are really good for analyzing data. So what we actually do is capture the data coming into the system in storage class memory in row format and migrate it down to column format into the QLC. So that means that I have really fast capture on storage class memory and really strong analytics on the QLC. So now this is really important as I want to be able to have agents interacting with data that's still on my eventing infrastructure so I can make decisions on what's happening in real time. But we're also seeing customers love this for more traditional data analytics workloads that have eventing infrastructure. I can't get any insights from it. I've got to move that to a data lake, move that to a data warehouse.
Phil,
Yep.
the challenge with events and brokerage and things, it's quite high throughput activities, and you're building a row relational database out of it and then moving it to a column and database. Did you have the compute structure to be able to support this at, I don't know, million transactions a second? I mean, what would that look like from a cluster perspective?
Absolutely. So fun lead in. We've tested this per server. Not only is it simpler, more scalable, we are dramatically faster, right? So we tested it. We're doing 1.5 million transactions per server. One of the first ever customers that I knew that was looking at VAST, they needed 11 servers in their eventing infrastructure, 3 on ours, right? So it's faster, it's easier to scale, and it's dramatically simpler, right? So when I look at trying to consolidate this and give my agents a view into what's happening in my real-time environment, this is a game changer for our customers. The whole white paper on the details of the performance.
Yeah.
Love that TN question. Okay, so a couple of things that we're going to hit on. Shared nothing. It's everywhere. It's causing problems everywhere. We're also seeing huge problems with shared nothing in the vector database world because it's the same thing. Another distributed architecture, vector databases, right? Some of the things that are challenging with vector databases. I want to scale beyond a server. Same thing like we're doing with data reduction. I've got to create shards, right? Now every one of my servers only has a piece of that vector index, right? These are very memory bound. Generally speaking, when you're building vector databases, you're trying to get all the activity in the database to happen in memory. So I either need to scale more servers, right, which adds more complexity, or beef up the server's memory footprint. We've seen customers with like 10 terabytes of memory in a server trying to squeeze as many vectors that they can into one server. And then another real problem here is that inserts and updates very, very slow, right? The data structures that make it easy to search vectors make it really difficult to add new ones because I've got to like understand how do you relate to what's already in the system. I want to make sure that you actually do some clustering. So data that looks the same, you're trying to keep it close together so I don't have to go really far apart to find things that are close together. So that's some big scale challenges. We see more of the scale challenges as customers do more data or get into more rich types of media. I want to do AI and inference on video instead of documents, right? So we do see customers and they're like, our vector databases are working fine. But something that we've realized, if all you're doing is like PDF search, you're not going to create that many vectors. So here's a real example. Customer, 600 million documents, 600 terabytes of storage. It's like 4 billion vectors, right? It's not that meaningful. If I looked at, a blue chip enterprise with 100 petabytes of data, I want to vectorize the whole thing, 43 trillion vectors, right? That's a lot of different vector databases that I'm going to have to shard up and move around. And my data is very fragmented. I have to build a lot of intelligence on top of that to make sure that my AI can get to the right index that's going to have the data that I'm looking for. So we now have a vector database built on the DAYS architecture that solves a bunch of these scaling problems. So one, we're able to get to trillions of vectors, right? So I can store a ton of data and consolidate without worrying about sharding and breaking up my databases, one giant vector database. We did a really cool smart cities project. That customer had 52 different shards of their vector database, one on VAST, right? They really couldn't get it to work. Vector search scalability, again, a lot of times these struggle with search at scale. As I add more, I'm constantly trying to move data around, keeping things that I expect people will ask about right next to each other. That becomes harder and harder and harder as the system scales. Insert scalability. The fact that we can do real-time performance at scale into that storage class memory means that we can do rapid inserts. Generally speaking, that's one of the biggest areas where we see vector databases tip over. I want an agent to watch a video feed. And while that video feed's coming in, I need to be embedding it and chunking it up and storing new vectors. That in-memory model does not work for that. It just tips over. Pretty much everyone gets to video, everything falls over. PDF's fine, video bad on legacy vector databases. And another problem is around security. And this is something really cool. Like, why are we not just all these different products? It's one product. Because we can actually take the same permission structure and apply it from the document, image, video that you've given us to the vector that's created based on that video, right? So it's really easy to say, like, I can access a document and Scott can't, right? That's kind of, enterprises have figured that out. But what they didn't figure out was, how do I make it so my large language model won't answer a question about that document for me if I don't have access to it? That's hard. The first thing we saw happen when enterprises started dropping everything into large language models, everyone started asking questions about stuff they weren't supposed to know, right? Like, how much does my CEO make? Where does he live? It's like, all right, man, maybe we got to shut that down. So how do we put that in place and make sure if the permission of a piece of data changes, that the permission of the vector changes? And we can do that with VAST because I apply a common data set of permissions across tables, objects, files, right? And I know we're really running on time. Something that we can also do, we haven't talked about, our data engine, that I can also create data-driven workflows on VAST. So as a video comes in, I recognize it's a video, I launch the embedding process for a video, and I store those vectors back into the VAST database. So I know I'm at time. There's other things I wanted to cover, but we won't hit on. But we do have our first user conference coming up at the end of next month, February 24th in Salt Lake City. We're going to have a bunch of announcements, a bunch of great customers there. So if you want to learn more, it's definitely a great place to tune in on what's happening with VAST and what's going forward. Thank you again, Scott, and the team and all the delegates for having us today.
Oh, good morning, everybody. My name is Scott Shadley. I'm a Director of Leadership Narrative and Evangelist for Solidigm. And just in case you're wondering why I have such a long title, I decided to get paid by the letters in my title. So it helps with the whole process of upping my annual income. And alongside me today is Phil Menes. I said that right? Menes, thank you. Go-to-market execution lead at Vast Data. So we're going to split this up a little bit for you guys today. He's going to step off for a bit. We're going to give you the look and feel of the world from a storage provider, i.e. hardware, and then we're going to bring Phil up and give you a great rundown of how software and hardware work well together in the ecosystem. So
looking forward to talking to you guys soon.
Alrighty. So we wanted to talk to you today a little bit. It's the beginning of the year. There's lots of fun things going on in 2026. We're going to talk about the market, some drives, because, you know, that's what I make, the cooling effect of what's going on in the world, and also a little bit about a lab that we might have spun up at Solidigm as well. But before we get into it, I wanted to kind of give an analogy and kind of wake up the room. It's 8 o'clock on a Friday, day 3. We got to have some fun. So feeding the data requirements. How can we talk about storage in a fun, different, and sugar-filled way because I have a sugar problem? So we have this really cool feature known as the glazed donut. If you look at it, it has some very interesting things about it, but there's always this problem with the hole. And the hole and the look of this to me says hard drive. And it spins and it has a certain feature. And there's a gap you have to cross with some data processing and things like that. And if you put everything in the same shape and design of a glazed donut, it's always going to take like a glazed donut. So SSDs have spent decades following the hard drive mantra. But we've decided to have some fun now in the ecosystem. And now we've brought in the Maple Bar. Kind of looks like the form factor of certain drives that now exist in the marketplace, E1S, E3, things like that. We broke the mold of going round. We've gone off and done our own thing with storage, and we make some amazing dough at Solidigm. Solidigm is a great data houser because you can store all kinds of data in the nice little intricacies of the dough inside. And we put a nice little glaze on top because we want to make sure that you have some flavor as well. A little bit of performance kick here, a little bit of capacity kick there. But we also know that at the end of the day, you got to have a little bit more once in a while. And I'm not going to break it open because it's going to spill jelly everywhere. But there's this thing called a jelly donut. And so if I build a really amazing storage drive and you guys have lots of fun putting your data in there, what are you going to do with your data? Because I'm not the guy that's going to sit here and figure out how to manipulate, play, and manage your data, but I'm going to hold it, I'm going to store it, I'm going to keep it safe. So that's why we've brought our partner Phil from Vast Data along, because they're kind of like the jelly in the jelly-filled donut. We make the right amount of room, we make the right cavity in the space of the data, and how it's managed, stored, can be transferred in and out. And they fill it up very nicely with their software solutions and take advantage of some of the features that when we partner together, make the products even more effective and useful. So that's my morning wake up for the how to bring sugar, because I love sugar, into a presentation at 8 o'clock on a Friday morning. So when you think about data and you think about next time you pick up a donut, there's so many different varieties of donut, but the right one is always the Solidigm one. How about that? So I also want to ask the room, because you guys get to speak up. So there's this whole thing about storage for AI. We've got a lot going on. We're going to dig into a whole bunch of it today. But before we kick it off, I'm just curious, anybody awake enough to kind of throw out their thoughts about what's going on with the bubble that we're in today and where we see that bubble going? Is anybody willing to throw out a thought on what they think of this? Is it a flash in the pan? Are we 3 years, 5 years? Does it last forever? Just open it up for a quick thought.
Just take the jelly donut and do this to it.
I was told not to throw things.
But you can smash them.
You can smash them.
No, that's true, but then I would make a mess and I'd have to get involved with paying the cleanup bill.
Well, that's your answer.
That's the
It's
answer.
going to be a mess.
It's going to be a mess. I like that.
But yes.
It's going to be a mess. So we don't disagree. There's definitely been a lot of challenges, and a lot of it has to do with supply and demand and how they cycle. I've been doing this for way too long. It was fun. When I hit 20 years, I'm like, I'm a 20-year veteran in the industry. I hit 30 this year. Starting to feel a little old. So I've been doing this for 30 years. And my first cycle was the year I started in 1996. Because I joined a semiconductor company and everybody was raving about the bonus checks and the upcycle and everything like that. And I started when it hit. And so I saw all the big checks, but I never saw the big check. All my coworkers started selling cars and all that kind of stuff because of that first cycle all the way back in 96. And we've ebbed and flowed through these cycles. And I've got a couple of examples of the big cycles that have hit the market. So when we transitioned from the 2D architectures to 3D architectures, there was a huge hit because when you change a wafer from one technology to another technology, there's going to be a gap. Doesn't matter if you've got more fabs, more wafers, whatever. To bring one online, you have a glut in the old one, but then the new one comes online at such a higher density that boom, we hit this massive oversupply. So 2D went 3D, we had an oversupply problem. So that was induced by the vendors. So there's a storyline here. The pandemic came around. This is a few decades later, and we started having the hoarding happen. And I threw up here my favorite little object that's been hoarded by all the folks during the pandemic, and we remember those days, right? They did the same thing with semiconductor products. People were like, oh my word, the world's shutting down. We've got to have everything on the shelf to spare because there's no way we're going to be able to replace products over time. People were locking their engineers in data centers. I had a friend of mine who literally was on a 1-month cycle. He got 1 month, he got to stay in the data center, sleep on a cot in a storage room, and then he got a month off and he went back in and he was getting paid hazard pay for the month he was in the building. But he could not interact with anybody. And so the industry hoarded our products. And so we sold everything in 2020, 2021, and then it stopped. Everybody kind of said, well, hold back. And then we hit the next big down cycle. And it was a big down cycle because the world shut down, innovation had stopped, everybody was just keeping the lights on. So the wells dried out for the innovation on the R&D side to put up new fabs, new this, new that. And now we come into the current cycle, and all of a sudden, we've got this situation where we've got a good amount of supply. We've got a great situation in the market for the opportunity for amazing upside, but nobody was investing at the back half of the pandemic because we didn't have the money to do it. Nobody did. And so we get things like the CHIPS Act, which help a bunch of companies do things, and we get a bunch of stuff happening, and all of a sudden, the AI bubble hits, and we're like, oh my gosh, memory, 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 memory. Well, Solidigm doesn't make memory, but we use memory in our drives, and we have a parent company that makes memory. And it turns out that the memory fab and the NAND fab are not interchangeable anymore. That stopped around the 3D era, where you had to have dedicated NAND lines and dedicated memory lines. All the investment in the last 18 months to 2 years, memory fab, memory fab, memory fab, because the storage was just still not really being the belle of the ball, if you will. But now we're starting to see, especially with what's happened, and we'll get into a little bit of the demonstration of that, with the recent uptick of need of storage. So we've hit the memory wall. We've got memory, they're building more memory, and the memory will come online in the next 18 months. But we still have a problem on the storage side. So we have capacity that's coming online. People have made announcements. We've talked about what we're going to do to increase supply and how we're going to manage all that. But you throw in the AI bubble, the lack of investment, and the Moore's Law slowdown of the two on two, and you have this amazing situation we're now riding, which is this little bit of lack of supply for the amount of demand we have. And the demand is driven by the industry. Think of all the IoT devices, everybody's watch, everybody's everything, the autonomous car takeover, the humanoid robots. It's not just the simple fact that we don't have enough wafers to make stuff. It's the fact that people are consuming it in so many different ways, even more so now than we did 20, 30 years ago. So the age of AI is definitely going to keep us moving. You know, you've heard a lot of people talk about being sold out for 26 and going into 27. Our friends in the spinning world just yesterday on the earnings announcement said they've got LTAs through 27 for their spinning products. So we're going to see this for a little while longer, but we're excited about it because it gives us an opportunity at Solidigm to do things that are on the forefront of innovation instead of just making the next great drive. How do we make what we've got, what you can get access to, work better, faster, stronger? And that's where partnerships like with VAST come into play that you'll hear about as we get through this presentation. So it's an opportunity for us to actually engage more and do more with our customers than we've already been doing. Because one of the big things is there's a lot of recent headlines that come from a whole bunch of different places, TechCrunch, Bloomberg, Forbes, Benzinga, that are all talking about what needs to happen for the AI data center. And we managed to throw up a headline from our site about all the work that we've already done to address some of these problems today, and that we can move forward into the next world. So talking about, you know, went from back end to center stage from a data center perspective. So we've talked about economics. We've got a great bunch of stories on TCO, including a great one with our partner VAST. Achieving the scale. We're very close to several of the NeoCloud players in the marketplace, CoreWeaves and others that have been very good about being partners with us in this industry drive as we move things forward. And then, you know, the market that never existed, we'll get a little bit more into that, but Jensen at CES made this comment that storage is now important. And I think everybody at Solidigm kind of took a, you know, fall off the chair moment and said, yay, somebody finally talks about storage. So, but the idea is we've been thinking about this from day one. We've always been that. We've talked about it. We were here at Field Day 2, AI Infrastructure Field Day 2, talking about the AI cycle, how we impact it, how we work with it. It's not about building a PCIe Gen 6 drive that operates at 7 gigabytes per second and 200 million IOPS. It's about how do you use that product in a system and make it most effective for the customer. And that's what we spend most of our time at Solidigm doing, is focusing on this concept of how to drive customer success with the portfolio of products that they need, not necessarily the big shiny object in the room. So this is the one product pitch slide I have for you in the entire presentation. And you can see we basically got two categories of products for people to consume from a performance perspective and a capacity perspective. Performance, our flagship product here is the PS1010. I've highlighted it because we're going to talk about it a little bit more in the deck with some of the stuff we're doing around our cooling infrastructure. And of course, the P5336 is our belle of the ball. It's the 122 drive. If you were lucky enough to join us last year at the second field day, you all received your own personal version of a 122. Unfortunately, it was Legos, but you did receive one. But some of the metrics around that. So high capacity is a thing that a lot of people were like, we're never going to see it. We're never going to be able to ship it because it's, it's just too big. It's just too expensive. But at the same point in time, you can see the metrics here. 4 and 5 exabytes of a high capacity drive in 2025 were sold by Solidigm. 3060 122. 1 and 2 exabytes of anything over 30 terabytes was shipped by Solidigm in the market. And we had 100% of the 122 market in 25. So a lot of people talk about delivering a product, and a lot of people talk about, look at my pretty little object, and some announcements were made last August to FMS. But we're out the door shipping it, delivering this product, and you'll hear how it's being consumed by my co-presenter Phil a little bit later on. So we don't just build a product to build a product. We build a product that customers want to consume. Because if you look at the market and the mix, PCIe Gen 3, 4, 5, and we've got these pretty graphs in our marketing decks that we can send out if you guys are interested to show the transitions of who's consuming what form factor, what generation of PCIe, what capacity. We track it all, and we make sure that we're always in the sweet spot. Our products and our solutions are always going to be where people can get them, use them, and deploy them effectively. And at some point, the TCO has to work out too, the cost structure. So when we were here last time, I talked to you guys a little bit about liquid cooling, and I brought a cool little display. That display is currently running around at many different places and actually getting in the process of being deployed. But we thought about this and we said, you know what? Cooling has 3 aspects. First of all, we got the fans. Everybody knows the fans. We hear some fans in the room from the projector, things like that. Everything was cooled by a fan. And that dictated, very much like the round circle of storage, a specific form factor and deployment model for customer server solutions. So the only way to get around that is to either slow them down by adding bigger, fatter fins on our drives and making airflow adjustments and all these conversations about linear feet per minute, or LFM, not the nice LLMs and AI. But then we get this AI bubble and we get these massive GPUs consuming hundreds of watts of power, and we'll talk about that as well. And they started putting cold plates on them. But it's interesting, if you look at a server configuration, the one product in most servers today that is considered the must still be 100% human serviceable, it's the storage product. Because the history of certain types of round media had lots of problems. They're great products, don't get me wrong. I love our friends in the spinning industry, but they just have mechanical issues. And when we switched over to the solid state drive market, we put them in the same boxes because it had to fit in the same slot that made it serviceable. But if I show you failure rates for these drives, the solid state drive, there's so much less, but yet people still don't trust them the same way they do the GPU in the back that's mounted to the board with a cold plate. And if it decides to fail, you replace the server. My little drive out front still has to come in and out because you might just want to replace it. And so how do you do that? You put a liquid cold plate on the drive. And we showed that off to you guys last time, and I have a slide of it as well. But then we got to go one step further. Okay, if we're going to talk about cooling, there's this really cool thing called a dunk tank. And when I first started selling enterprise drives into the immersion market, it was 2008, and we had to pull the drive apart, conformally code it, sell it as NCNR, and pray and hope it never failed. Because once you conformally code it, there's no rework, no nothing. We can't do that and make it a mass scale at the way an AI data center is going. So we have to find other ways around it. So what does Solidigm do? We tell our quality guys, go figure out how to make a dunk tank work, for example. So we showed off the liquid cold plate architecture last time. This is the cool little sliding instrument where we take our E1S and we slide it in against a cold plate. We actually had to take that cold plate design that we showed off last year to SNIA, because we're an active and leader in SNIA standard body around form factors, because when you put a drive against a cold plate, and if you look at my nice broken pinky fingers, they don't touch. And if they don't touch, you don't get cooling. So we actually took the specifications we designed around that E1S drive to SNIA to redefine the form factor requirements for a cold plate for the entire industry. We gave that information away so that we can enable this market moving forward. It's not just about us, it's about making sure the customers get what they want. And they're not always going to buy us, they're going to buy someone else We want them to have a working solution at all times. And so we stiffened the flatness. We made the tolerances different, and we made sure that you had to put the sticker on the appropriate side, because if you've looked at drives from all the vendors, we tend to put stickers on whatever side we want. And of course, a sticker is a dielectric, so you lose your cooling and effects and things like that. We had to chamfer the corner of a drive. We have these nice square blocks because it just works. And when you come from a mechanical pressing perspective, a square corner is actually easier than a round corner. But when you're sliding hard metal on soft metal, you really don't want to scrape it, and it has to be insertion friendly. So we actually cut the corner off the drive. Things like that. Those are the kinds of work that went into just doing a liquid cold plate solution. So now we take a look at full immersion. We're sitting and we're dunking the server in a tank. We have two versions of that exist today, single phase and two phase. I've grayed out two phase because we're kind of not playing in that space right now. It's a little bit more of an interesting ecological and environmental beast, and not as much work is done in that space today because it's a constrained, confined, and somewhat caustic environment, depending on how you look at it. So we're focused on single phase, which is an open air tank. And we worked with partners like Hypertech around the server design, how to help them make sure their server solution and our drives work well together. And we work with a company, Doug, who does portable, edge-friendly data centers. It's literally a container that you can take out and drop anywhere and just plug it in, fire it up, and you've got a portable data center and an immersion tank. And they've been doing that for quite some time. But it's fun to talk about it, but you guys like data. Technical presentations are always a good thing. And so we wanted to give you a little bit of detail on this. So we were at Supercompute in November last year, and we had Hypertech as a server vendor, Valvoline as a fluid vendor, and Midas as a tank vendor in our booth together, showing a combined architected solution for our customers. So we're one little cog in that wheel, and we're not the biggest cog in that wheel, but we bring these people together intentionally to show the innovation and capabilities of these technologies. And
Scott.
Yes.
Ray.
There. Sorry. I heard the voice of God.
I'm trying to understand where NAND requires that much cooling. It's not like it was a big thermal, heat sink in the past. I mean, is it because of the capacity? Is it because of
Density, maybe?
the speeds of your logic, or what's going on?
So, interesting question. They have gotten warmer over the years. PCIe Gen 4 to Gen 5, just nature and thermals, just like with going from Hopper to Grace to Vera, gets hotter and hotter and hotter. We're not the hottest thing in there, but in order to cool us, you still have to cool us in the right environment. And if everything else in the box has a fan or has a liquid and I have to have a fan, you've put something together. If you look at the CES presentation from Jensen, the 2 million parts down to 15 parts.
Yeah.
They got there because we worked with them to define the liquid cold plate for the storage. So it's not necessarily about how much heat we generate or how cool you have to keep us.
You're in this ecosystem that requires.
We enable the rest of the ecosystem to move forward with net innovation. So the Vera Rubin compartmentalized liquid cooled system exists because we worked with them to define how the cold plate can work with the storage device. And so when we talk to people that want to do immersion, you talk about supercomputing like Cray and other companies like that have been immersing things for decades. That's the next logical step. So it isn't about just the thermal of our drive, but how our drive impacts the ability to deploy the system, if that makes sense. And so to do this, as I mentioned, you used to have to conformally coat these things and all that kind of stuff, and it creates a whole new product category, cost category. People want off-the-shelf products going into an immersion tank. And so I had the luxury of going up to Montreal, and I'm the hand candy, so that's why it's not a pretty hand. Dragging my drive out of a live server in an immersion tank, pulling it up, putting it back in. I would show a video, but videos don't tend to work great, so you get a screen cap. But there's interesting challenges, again, for our product in this solution. Like, it used to be front accessible. Well, now it has to be top accessible, right? They still have to architect an immersion server where I can reach in and do that without causing problems to the rest of the system. Now, it's interesting, Valvoline, Castrol, all these companies that do the fluids, it's classified as a food-grade lubricant so that they can ship it from around the world. And it comes in these massive tanks that are being shipped back and forth. And now the problem when you go to display one of these at a trade show isn't about physical footprint. It's can this floor support the weight of the solution? Because these things are now laying down, and think of a giant bathtub full of electronics. So it's, thousands, tens of thousands of pounds being put on floors. So now going to deploy immersion, it's even more entertaining, things like that. But what we found out in doing this research is we started playing with a bunch of these different fluids. There's a whole bunch of different types. I'm not going to get into today. If you want to learn a little bit more about that, go to OCP Global 25's a history file, and our hardware engineer does an actual deep dive where my little graph comes from. But one of the benefits that we found for Solidigm was that when you have a fan, you have a certain amount of nuance how the LFM works. When you have a cold plate, you've got, is the water temperature always the same? In a tank, you have the most succinct, sustained temperature of any environment. And what is a semiconductor like? Consistent temperature. The hardest problem with doing things like endurance and reliability on a semiconductor is going really warm and going really cold and keeping the data accurate. The flatness of an immersion tank is amazing from a temperature perspective.
Throttle limit is when you would start throttling the performance of the drive because of the thermal.
Yeah, because it's getting too hot. If we program too hot on a 4-bit per cell product, you go cold for whatever reason, like you decide to turn it off for a while, it's a little harder to read type of thing. So we throttle it intentionally to make sure that we don't overstress the semiconductor. But in the fluid, you can see it doesn't really matter. It's always very subtle, very comfortable at those temperatures.
So are those drives then targeted for storage solutions or also for servers? Because, I mean, CPUs will have liquid cooling, GPUs,
yeah,
memory. So does everybody do their own little thing then?
Everybody has to play well in the ecosystem. Right. And so for us, what the big focus was is validating our products are warrantable and usable in these environments for long term. People have been putting them in tanks without, quote, permission forever, right? But now we're saying it's time to be part of the party and make sure we understand what's going on. So the middle picture of the drive, the reason it's showing it open is one of the biggest challenges with these food-grade lubricants is the TIM acts like a sponge and or it can start to melt away. Now, you've still got the fluid running through the drive because it finds its ways in the nooks and crannies, but it has a potential to create too much liquid connection to a single part because the sponge just sits there and is constantly pressing one temperature dot on a mini transistor inside the drive that could literally cause the drive to fail. So we've done this research to make sure what's going on, and our partners at Hypertech actually take an off-the-shelf air-cooled ready GPU, tear it apart and remove the TIM, and put it back together to put it in their servers for these tanks, because the TIM is one of the biggest problems in these drives. So when I was there in Montreal, I said, how do you guys test these products without going into this giant Submer or Doug or whatever tank and validate whether the products work or not? And he said, he walked me over to the corner. He's like, can't take a picture because there's too much other stuff going on there, but it's an industrial size deep fryer from like a food truck. And I'm like, we used to joke about, can I get my tater tots in the tank? But they really do use an industrial size because it's the only thing they can put a smaller component in and keep it at the right temperatures, right? They're not frying it, but they use the fryer to get the temperature, have the basket, all that kind of stuff. I thought it was absolutely hilarious. So the number one problem that we actually have with our drive in an immersion tank system is the sticker. The food grade lubricant eats the sticker glue and the label falls off. Doesn't cause any problems in the server, just it's now unidentifiable. So we actually, the current solution is to put a layer of nail polish lacquer over the stickers for all the components, not just ours. Any label on any drive falls off in these fluids. So literally, to get that drive to stay intact for the label for the pretty, Photoshop, we put nail polish on it.
Scott,
hold it in place.
Real quick, you mentioned, I think you said TIM. TIM, what was that?
TIM. The blue goo on the drive is thermal interface material. TIM. Sorry, I used an acronym without defining it. I'm not really, don't tend to forget that. Thank you very much. So that's an example of how we're working that. And so what we have to do is now we have to validate our drive in all these different fluids. So we have to get our own version of an industrial fryer, if you will, put our products in it, test it, make sure they work. And there's, as you would with any kind of fan system, there's multiple vendors that we're playing with. So we're doing a lot of work right now to validate the immersion cooling architectures for our products at this point.
Are you doing any of the kind of new stuff like Microsoft is doing, where they're actually sending the fluid they have cold plates and they send the fluid directly to the component that's overheating when it needs it? Have you seen that?
Not specifically. If it's cold plate involved, it's going to be a different type of fluid. It can just be a glycol or even water. These are different types of things. These are oil-based derivatives.
Yeah, I think they're doing it without water. That's the whole initiative they're doing. So
So
If not, I thought you knew about it. You meant to tell me, but
not that specific version of it. No.
Okay.
But yeah, the whole process here is also to avoid the water loss, right? Because we've talked about one of the things that we're actually working on in our efficiency stories that you'll be seeing coming out from Solidigm over the rest of the year, and we'll introduce a little bit at our next field day event that we're coming to, is the idea of a WUE. So we have a PUE, which is power utilization effectiveness. Now there's a water utilization effectiveness. And we actually help customers understand. We've gone to the point where some of our TCO models take into the amount of carbon footprint impact of the concrete used for the footings underneath the data center that our drives are going into to help customers understand how to use these products. So we're definitely very much thinking outside the box on how we help customers solve their net problems with these products.
Now, Scott, you mentioned something about changing the interface so it's top versus side. I mean, I don't see that in the drive here.
Well, so if the server's inserted in a rack,
right,
you call it a front-loaded drive.
Right.
But if the server's vertical, it's now a top-loaded drive.
But it's the same.
It's semantic.
I gotcha.
It was part of a fun conversation. There's a video I can send you the link to of that. But we were discussing, is it really front-loaded now because it's coming out of the top? But no, it is effectively the same architecture for our cage.
Right.
But even in a liquid-cooled environment, the cage is 100% sealed around the drives, and it kind of has its own little baby ecosystem. But we have to work with them to build the slots for the drives to allow the fluid around it. So we go from making sure air can flow, getting it as tight as we can with liquid cold plate, and then we open it back up again, and then making it stay effective for the different uses of the drives. So as you can see, E1S in this thing, we've done the U.2s as well, but it's all about helping our customers figure out how to play well with these products and these ecosystems. So customer innovation. There's this wonderful thing called AI and the AI factory, and we started talking to a whole bunch of our customers, and we were like, so I can give you a drive. Where are you going to put it? What are you going to do with it? We want to help you. And they're like, well, we like the help you part. We're not sure where to put it because we don't actually have one either because nobody can get them because they're all getting deployed by a NeoCloud here, this, that, or the other thing. So Solidigm built the Solidigm AI Central Lab. We actually went out, acquired a whole bunch of architectures, footprints, partner platforms, and we've built an independent lab that can allow customers to remote in and test our architecture. Because lack of infrastructure, we fix that problem. High cost of a lab, we're taking on that burden. Limited real-world storage data, generate it on these tools in our environment. It's remote to you, it's secure, we've got all those data sovereignty problems solved, and then we can help you work on how to optimize it. If you want us to play nice with you, if you just want to play with it, let us know how you want to work together. And so the first version of the lab looks something like this. So we've got E3 2 petabytes in Granite Rapids servers. We've got 4 JBOFs full of 122 terabyte drives, and we've got another petabyte in storage servers. The whole north, south, east, west. This is built. This shows all the hoppers and the B200s, H200s that we have. We've got Grace Blackwell's coming in, and we will be getting the Vera Rubin platforms as well to put into this lab. So it's an ever-evolving ecosystem. And that's why it says, quote, exciting new infrastructure updates. So this lab has the ability to create whatever architecture you want. You want to play with performance drives in a storage server. I've got them in my E3S platform. You want to play with my 122 drives and you want 2 petabytes of storage to play with, but you don't want to buy it, and I really don't want to ship it to you for free. Guess what? I can let you remote into it here in the AI lab. So we've actually got a wait list right now of partners that want to come in and do work in this lab on these infrastructures. And we found out that some of our partners have even wanted to deliver their hardware solution that taps into this to go in the lab so that we can actually do it real time in our lab that way as well. We've changed the game on the concept of sampling a customer, because sending drives out to everybody is always a lot of fun. People like to see the real product and sometimes do those direct compares, but a one-to-one never really helps sell the value of a solid-state drive. It never has. Maybe in a laptop environment, sure, send them one drive. But in a server environment, you need to send a rack of data to make it work. And this is a way that we solve that problem, is give you direct access, remote in, load your tools up. We'll help you design, develop around it. We actually partnered with a NeoCloud Farm GPU and RunPod to help us run it. So it's not just us. We're not doing it in a vacuum. We're playing with the proper players in the ecosystem to drive this lab environment.
This is because you have so many customers who are generating 122 terabytes of data every day.
They're generating lots and lots of data, and I don't want to ship drives that I can sell for no good reason either, if you will. Because again, you can't sample one or two and make it work for an AI software solution involvement.
It seems to me that you could actually generate some data to fill this up by just having two chat GPTs talk to each other.
We've played around with that, actually, yes. Our good friend John Michael Hands has done a lot of work with his lab environment and playing with different ways to utilize it. And we're using a lot of some of those resources actually when they're not active with customers. We're using them internally to do exactly what you're talking about, optimizing even internal Solidigm systems using stuff from our own AI lab. So drinking our own Kool-Aid. So when we were here last time, we introduced our friends from Metrum AI, and we talked about a little demo that we put up about how to do RAG offload. And that's the 65% lower DRAM with no performance loss that we talked about. And that white paper is out on our website. We can get you the link for that if you're interested. Phase 2 of that was introduced at Supercompute and will be published very shortly. But with the whole KV cache environment, we started looking at it again before the CES announcement. We were already like, KV cache is something we got to play with. We got to understand it, how it works. It's been slightly redefined, and we'll get into that in this next little section. But we already have been able, with this AI lab, working with Metrum in this environment, showcase that we can get 27 times faster time to first token because we're using offloaded KV cache to our SSDs to help solve the problem. So we basically have pre-proven what was announced by what's coming soon in the Vera Rubin platform using the existing architectures. So that time to first token, those really big careabouts that you have, we've already been able to validate because of the access of this lab to the data sets, to the infrastructure, and to those architectures.
You seem to be getting more and more involved in the system functionality rather than just plain storage.
We're storage for AI, and to be able to be storage for AI, we have to know how people use it. That's been one of the biggest gaps in a lot of the storage interactions. And one reason we bring a software partner to an event like this is it is about making sure you know how your product's being used. I can throw a FIO test at something. I can throw a customer test at something. That's not real world data.
Yeah.
And if anything, it helps improve my next generation product because I can tweak my designs. I can tweak how I do the over provisioning, how many flash channels I have, how I utilize the DRAM in the drive, because I know how the customers are actually using the product.
KV cache is a lot different than having tweaking, over provisioning and numbered channels and things of that nature.
It's a scale thing, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what we focus on. Most of our current customer base is scale customer, whether it's hyperscale, neo cloud, partners, all that kind of stuff. It's about how we can scale our product most effectively.